Yo. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.
I'm a headliner.
Going on, Headliner Nation. Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and for the first time ever, we get to say welcome to Week 18 of the NFL season. And listen, there's probably quite a few of you out there watching right now that have Week 18 championships. Now, if you do, talk to your commissioner and tell them to get rid of that for next year. It's no fun trying to play in Week 18, but we know that there's still a lot of people out there, so we still include it. Why? Because you still got to win some fantasy championships out there. So good luck to everybody this week if you're still out there competing for a fantasy football championship. We're going to make this week's episode, I don't want to say short and sweet, but we're going to get to it, right? We're going to get to it. For those of you out there that still need help, we want to make sure we get you help as quickly as possible. And for those of you out there that maybe you're just trying to check in on some information, maybe you plan on placing some bets or something. So some going to be some good knowledge in here for you. But we got to be hopping right into it, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go ahead and kick it off to our first matchup of the week in this wide receiver start and sit video for Week 18. And we're going to be going with the Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos. And for Kansas City, Tyreek Hill is going to be the only start for me this week. I don't really love the ceiling this week, though. Obviously, Tyreek Hill has a great ceiling any given week, but Denver is allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. If you remember, 3 weeks ago, absolutely shut down Ja'Marr Chase, who has been on a tear the last 2 weeks. And kind of a cool fact here, this Denver defense has allowed just as few points as the Super Bowl winning team from a few years ago did. So, that's pretty incredible. That is pretty incredible. But Tyreek Hill is going to be my only start in this matchup for the Kansas City Chiefs. That Denver defense, I think, is going to come to play last game of the season. And on the Denver side, Jerry Jeudy out last week with COVID, has not been cleared as of this recording yet. But with how that team has been playing, I'm not interested in starting any of those wide receivers. Our next matchup is going to be Dallas at Philadelphia. Unfortunately, Michael Gallup going down with an injury last week. Sucks to see that for him. Super disappointed. He was going to be heading into free agency and was hoping to see him land in a really nice spot. But for this week, CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper are both going to be starts for me. Obviously, with Gallup missing, it could end up leading to a few more targets coming their way. Although, as you'll see in the tight end video, I think Dalton Schultz is the one that benefits from that more than anybody. Philly has allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. I expect Darius Slay to be on Amari Cooper. So if that happens, CeeDee Lamb will have a little bit more upside than Cooper for me this week. On the flip side, for Devontae Smith, more than likely is going to be seeing a lot of Travion Diggs this week. If that happens, the last time those two face off against each other, Diggs held Devontae Smith to only 3 receptions and 28 yards. He's going to be a sit for me. Cincinnati at Cleveland, and you're playing every single Cincinnati wide receiver. It doesn't matter. Right. Yes, T. Higgins didn't really make an impact, but Tyler Boyd is still scoring touchdowns left and right now. It feels like Ja'Marr Chase winning everybody that owned him, almost anyway, fantasy football championships last year. And with as good as Higgins had been right before that, we're not going to be sitting him. So all the Cincinnati wide receivers going up against Cleveland are 100% going to be starts. This Cleveland team just looks flat right now. They don't look like they're interested in playing. They look like they've given up on the season. So for the offensive side, or for the defensive side of the ball for them, could end up giving up a big game to a Cincinnati team that wants to make sure they go into the playoffs rolling. And then on the flip side, though, for this offense in Cleveland, it's not good right now. It's super inconsistent. I don't think the Bengals are going to be allowing a letdown. They're going to come out. They're going to be ready to play. They're going to want to get that win in Cleveland, lock up that playoff seed. Obviously, that division's already locked up, and make sure they set themselves in stone right there, and then they come out ready and raring to roll for the first week of the playoffs. Green Bay at Detroit. Davante Adams, Allen Lazard are going to be starts for me as of right now, but we have to keep an eye on this matchup. Green Bay is the lone team in the NFL that has locked up a playoff spot that can't move. They're locked into the number 1 seed in the NFC. That's not going to change. I don't know if they're going to be sitting anybody this coming week. I think it is something that we need to keep an eye on. So make sure you know going into your matchup whether or not Davante Adams and Allen Lazard may or may not be playing. But as of right now, going up against Detroit, they're both going to be starts for me. And you know what? If they do all play, I'm going to throw out MVS as a start as well. It's the Detroit Lions. They just absolutely got torched last week by the Seattle Seahawks. But again, if they end up sitting a lot of people playing their second teamers, then at that point, it may not even matter. So keep an eye on the rankings to see what we have to say about that. And for the Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be my only start here. The first rookie in NFL history with 5 straight games of 8 or more receptions. Josh Reynolds still on the COVID list. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be a really, really safe start for a lot of fantasy owners this week. Chicago at Minnesota, Darnell Mooney, Allen Robinson. They're going to both make it in here as a start this week. Minnesota is still allowing the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And really a mix between Andy Dalton and the Minnesota D is going to be the perfect ending to a season for Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney. For Allen Robinson, obviously it's been a really, really tough season for him. Maybe finish it off with a bang here against Minnesota and Andy Dalton slinging the ball everywhere. Justin Jefferson for Minnesota is going to be my only start. No Adam Thielen, but I can't go with Osborne this week against Chicago. The Bears have been pretty good on defense against the pass for a majority of the season. So Justin Jefferson, we're always going to be willing to bet on him. Yes, last week was a struggle. Hopefully Kirk Cousins is back this week. If he is, we're definitely locking Justin Jefferson in. Washington at the New York Giants, and really there's not a whole lot to say here. Obviously, Terry McLaurin is going to be the one guy that we're going to be looking at in this matchup, and he's really the only guy I trust in the entire matchup. Earlier in the season, when the Giants and the Washington football team faced off, Terry McLaurin went off for 11 receptions on 15 targets for 105 yards and a touchdown. Whew. I'm taking Terry McLaurin this week to maybe not do the same exact thing, but to be just fine against the New York Giants. And for the New York Giants, I'm only going to list Kenny Golladay here. Why? Because it doesn't matter. I'm not playing anybody. This team is garbage. They had 24 passing yards last week. You really think I'm going to rely on anybody, any ball catchers in this game? Heck no. Indianapolis at Jacksonville, and for Indy, Michael Pittman should see enough volume and a must-win game against a bad defense to make him a safe start this week. Even if Indy gets out to a big lead and we see a lot of Jonathan Taylor, and I mean a lot of Jonathan Taylor, hopefully Michael Pittman still gets himself about 6, 7, 8 receptions before Indianapolis pulls it back, and if he does, should be more than enough to make the week. For Jacksonville, if you're trusting anybody here, obviously you've relied on nothing but luck to get to this point. So for me, I'm not feeling that lucky this week. Sit them all. Pittsburgh at Baltimore, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool. Baltimore is still allowing the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. And is this the last Big Ben game ever? Does he hang it up after the season? We know that he's probably done in Pittsburgh, but is this the last one ever? Well, we'll see. Even this past week, playing up against a Cleveland defense that is okay at times. It was like 24 completions for 100 and something yards. I mean, it's just ding and dunk, ding and dunk, ding and dunk. So I'm not feeling Chase Claypool. If you're looking for something high upside, risky, you need like a big play, then yeah. Chase Claypool. Deontay Johnson, however, he gets enough targets at this point that I think we'll be okay with it. Baltimore, again, still allowing the most wide receiver fantasy points over the last 4 weeks. So it could be one of those situations where Chase Claypool has 1 reception that really makes his day. Deontay Johnson puts together a few catches, hopefully scores a touchdown for you. For Baltimore, Marquise Brown, Rashad Bateman are both going to be starts for me. 18 combined targets between the two last week. And Pittsburgh is, coming off a good performance against Cleveland, right? I mean, listen. Okay. They fared well against Cleveland. Okay. The defensive secondary is, okay. But, I mean, they're really, really good at times. But they have been in the top 10 of most points allowed to wide receivers almost all year. So the one thing about Pittsburgh that's been tough to kind of figure out is it's been up and down with them. It's like you get some elite performances, then you don't. So last week of the season, I mean, Baltimore's still fighting to get in. Pittsburgh's still fighting to get in at this point. Both have outside chances. They're going to have to win this game. Baltimore at home, I think they're going to bring it. Wouldn't be surprised if Lamar Jackson gets a little bit of practice this week and gets himself back this week as well to get this must-win game in the books. We'll see what happens. But for Brown and Bateman, I think, 18 combined targets last week. I think we could see the same amount of targets this week, and that's going to make both of these guys pretty decent starts. Marquise Brown, a little bit more upside for me. I would take him over Bateman at this point. Bateman is kind of a low-end wide receiver 3 play. Tennessee at Houston. Julio Jones has been cleared. He looks to be back at practice this week. And the Tennessee Titans are looking to win to wrap up the first overall seed in the AFC. That's crazy with how much they've lost this year. It's insane. So they must win to keep first. So listen, A.J. Brown, having a bye, that would be great for this team. So Tennessee, I think, they're going to come out against Houston, and they are going to try to put it up early and often. If they can do that, then kind of try to sit back a little bit the rest of the game. They're not going to take their foot off the pedal, though, okay? They're not going to be a team that's going to be like, oh, we're up 15, we're going to start pulling some starters. No, I think you're going to see this team go entirely the entire game. That's like the worst analysis I've ever made. They're going to go 100% the entire game. They're going to want to come out, finish strong, head into a bye, take it home, try to get a little bit more healthy, have it locked up throughout the playoffs. Kansas City would have to come to them. Cincinnati would have to come to them. All the top teams are going to have to come to them. So I think you see them really try to put it on this game, make this a good game, make it a big win, and then go into the bye after that. So A.J. Brown is going to be a start for me. Even if this was a game where maybe they already had the 1 seed locked up, or maybe they were like the 3 and had it locked up, then maybe I'm like, maybe not that excited for it. But they're gonna want to get past Houston easily this week. And for Houston, I am going to go with Brandon Cooks. He's the only one on this team that gets consistent targets. This team should be trailing the majority of the game, and if they are, they'll be throwing to Brandon Cooks a lot. So for those of you looking for like a wide receiver 3 this week, Cooks is not the worst option in the world. New Orleans at Atlanta, and with Atlanta allowing the 6th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season, and New Orleans faced with another must-win this week, I've got Marquez Callaway coming out with a good game going up against these Atlanta Falcons, so I am on board with listing him as a start this week. And for the Atlanta Falcons, Russell Gage coming off a really tough game last week against Buffalo, knew that was going to be a tough one for him, and I'm sure a lot of you did as well. But he's still been the wide receiver 10 through week 12, or since week 12. He's been the wide receiver 10, even with that performance last week. So we are going to go back to listing him as a start. Going up against New Orleans, I'm pretty sure Atlanta is going to say, you know what? Not playing for anything, but let's play spoiler against one of our interdivision rivals. Buffalo and New England are still fighting for that number 1 spot there in the AFC East. So these two teams are going to be battling this week. Buffalo getting the New York Jets, though. So they're getting a potential little bit of an easier path into the playoffs. So for the New York Jets, I'm expecting Buffalo to come out hard. Buffalo has allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season and the fewest touchdowns. So even if Elijah Moore comes back, even though Braxton Berrios has been okay the last couple of weeks for fantasy owners, I'm not going with either of those guys against such a tough defense. And for the Buffalo Bills, Stephon Diggs, safe bet here to score a touchdown or get you about 80 receiving yards. He's been safe basically the entire season. Gabriel Davis, he does have a little bit more upside right now than Cole Beasley and Isaiah McKenzie. That's why I'm going with him to start over the other two options. San Francisco and the Los Angeles Rams, and for the San Francisco 49ers, Deebo Samuel, he moves around so much. I don't think he's going to be seeing Jalen Ramsey anyway this week. Brandon Ayuk, he is coming off a hot game, but this could end up being a little bit of a tougher matchup for him. I mean, San Francisco is going to have to win to get in this week. Not really win to get in. I mean, they're going to have some things go right, but they're going to have to win to have less of those things need to go right. And for the LA Rams, I mean, they're looking to clinch the division. They want to wrap it up. The Cardinals are also fighting for it right now. So this is going to be a must-win game for both of these teams to try and wrap up the division. For the Rams, I'm going to be moving over and taking Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, and Odell Beckham Jr. Was expecting much better last week, but it just didn't happen. Again, a must-win here, so I'm going to take my chances with all these guys. San Francisco is going to put up a fight. LA is going to have to throw the ball a little bit, and LA is going to have these guys score some touchdowns. New England's going to head to Miami, and Miami's playoff chances obviously gone now at this point, but they've played so well throughout a stretch of the season after such a tough beginning of the year that they're going to want to finish the year strong. And what better way to do that than beat the Patriots at home and have a chance to ruin their AFC East title chances. So for the New England Patriots, I mean, this is going to be a little bit of a tougher matchup. I am still going to start Kendrick Bourne and Jakobi Meyers. It was good to see another Meyers touchdown last week, but I don't know at this point about their upside. Miami's defense has been really, really good down the stretch. I mean, so good that I think it's just been overlooked by a whole lot of people. And because of that, I want to go with Kendrick Bourne and Jakobi Meyers as starts, because I do think Miami's going to play them tough. It's going to keep the game closer. New England's just not going to be able to run it the entire time. They could be missing some Damian Harris this week, depending on how that hamstring is feeling. And because of that, have Mac Jones, take control a little bit more. That's good for Jakobi Meyers and Kendrick Bourne. So I've got them listed both as starts, but they're going to be like in that wide receiver 3 range for me. For Miami, though, looking on this side, I mean, New England has been so tough against wide receivers all season long. I've got to go with Jalen Waddle as the only start here. I mean, he's just the only guy who has seen a decent amount of actual consistent targets so far this season. He hasn't seen enough. Last week was really a letdown, obviously, for Miami. Would have liked to see them play a lot better. It just didn't happen, unfortunately. So for Jalen Waddle, I think a little bit of a bounce back is in the books this week. But again, he's that guy that is a little bit more consistent with the volume. And because of that, I'm a little bit safer starting him this week, even if the upside is on the lower end of the spectrum. Another team out of the playoff picture, but they get to face a familiar divisional foe to try and ruin their chances at a division title. And that's what's going to happen with the Arizona Cardinals and the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are going to head out to Arizona. Arizona in one of those situations where they got to win, LA's got to lose, and they could potentially bring home the NFC West. But listen, the Seahawks, they're going to want to do some damage. They're going to want to ruin that for Arizona. That's the type of season that they're going to want to end with here. So for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, they're both going to be starts for me. Seattle will want to play spoiler. They're going to be trying to put it on the entire game. Arizona is allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. So Arizona's secondary is kind of getting, they're getting trashed a little bit right now. DK Metcalf, great performance last week. Big touchdown game. Tyler Lockett, only the 1 touchdown, but they could run the football against Detroit all day. They didn't really have to throw it too much. For Arizona, Christian Kirk, AJ Green are both going to be starts for me. Now, Seattle has struggled all over the field this year. Now, in the secondary, they have been a little bit better at times. As the season's gone on, they've gotten better, and I expect Seattle to bring it. So I don't think this is going to be any type of a cakewalk. I think they're going to have to definitely throw it, and I think they're going to have to take advantage of some plays down the field in order to win this game, and that's where Christian Kirk and AJ Green are both going to come into play. Green last week, not a huge day in terms of volume, but still some big catches down the field that leads to some higher efficiency, which hopefully we see that. But add in a touchdown this week in AJ Green would be a really easy start. Carolina at Tampa Bay. And for Carolina, listen, if Ian Thomas had more yards than anybody last week, we have an issue on this team. I'm not starting any of these guys. Just like last week, I'm not trusting it. For Tampa Bay, no Chris Godwin, no Antonio Brown. That leaves Mike Evans is the only option that I trust for Tampa Bay. It's going to be a whole lot of Mike Evans. It's going to be a whole lot of Rob Gronkowski, and that's all I care about. The Chargers and the Raiders are going to play on Sunday Night Football. Win or go home, baby. Unless they both tie and Indianapolis loses, then they both get in. odd scenario there that could play out. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams are both going to be starts for me. Both good games last week. I like Allen this week to see a lot of targets with LV, that line kind of getting after Herbert a little bit, making him run around, really have to get the ball out quickly. That's where Allen's going to be a really great asset this week. And then starting on the other side, Hunter Renfrow, Zay Jones are both going to be starts for me. The Chargers defense in the secondary has been a little inconsistent as of late. Obviously, this is a game I think it's going to be a whole lot of back and forth. And because of that, I think Las Vegas is going to have to throw, which means Hunter Renfrow, Zay Jones, lots of targets. There you have it, Headliner Nation. Week 18 in the books and the NFL season in the books. The last wide receiver start and sit show for the year. So do me a favor, make sure you hit that like button down below and leave me a comment. What wide receiver do you think is going to have the best week this week? Who comes out as the wide receiver one at the end of the week? And if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, you gotta hit subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Stick around for all the great off-season content. Love you all. Appreciate you all tuning in all season long. Don't forget, though, we're going to be here all off-season, so don't go anywhere. Stick around and get a head start on the 2022 season. I'm going to get out of here, though. All of you stay safe and stay healthy, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
I'm a headliner.